The first thing Naya felt was pain, not the sharp kind that screams, but the slow-burning ache of rope biting into her wrists and dust scraping her skin raw as she was dragged across the open land like something already dead. The sun hung mercilessly above, bleaching the sky white, turning every breath into fire. She tried to scream, but her throat was dry, her voice swallowed by the wind and the thunder of hooves pounding the earth ahead of her. The horse never slowed. The man riding it never looked back. To him, she was cargo, another savage taken from the edge of civilization, another Apache woman who had dared to step beyond her place. That's what she believed, because belief was easier than hope, and hope had been beaten out of her long before the rope ever touched her wrists. Hours passed, or maybe minutes, time had lost its meaning. When the horse finally stopped, Naya collapsed onto the dirt, coughing, shaking, her long black hair tangled with blood and sand. She forced herself to look up, expecting cruelty, expecting laughter, expecting the sharp edge of a gun barrel or the cold finality of a bullet. Instead, she saw silence. The ranch rose behind the man like a fortress of wood and stone, sturdy, weathered, built by hands that knew hard work. The man dismounted slowly. He was tall, broad-shouldered, his face lined not with malice but with exhaustion. His eyes, gray like storm clouds, studied her, not with hunger or hatred, but with something she couldn't name. That frightened her more than anger ever could. "You're safe here," he said. His voice was low, steady, carrying none of the cruelty she had prepared herself for. Safe. The word felt like a lie. She spat blood into the dirt and glared at him. "I would rather die," she hissed. He didn't flinch. He crouched instead, carefully cutting the rope from her wrists. "You almost did," he replied quietly. He stood and called toward the house. "Mary. Water." A woman appeared in the doorway, older, stern-faced, but her eyes softened the moment she saw Naya's condition. She rushed forward with a blanket and a tin cup. Naya recoiled, her body screaming at her to fight, but she was too weak. The water touched her lips, cool and life-giving, and despite herself, she drank. That night, Naya lay on a real bed for the first time since her village had burned. She stared at the wooden ceiling, waiting for the horror she was certain would come. But none did. No footsteps. No threats. Only the distant sound of wine through the plains and the creak of the house settling into sleep. She didn't trust it. She couldn't. Men like him always waited until the guards were down. Morning came with the smell of coffee and bread. Mary brought her food and left without a word, as if respecting an unspoken boundary. When Naya finally stepped outside, she saw the rancher working the land with his own hands, fixing a fence, his sleeves rolled up, sweat darkening his shirt. No overseers. No whips. No chains. He noticed her watching but didn't approach. That unsettled her. Days passed. Her strength returned slowly, but her anger stayed sharp. She asked no questions and answered none. The rancher, Ethan, spoke to her only when necessary. He offered work, not orders. "You don't owe me," he told her when she finally confronted him. "Then why bring me here like an animal?" she demanded. His jaw tightened. "Because if I hadn't," he said, "the men who were hunting you would have killed you before sunset." The truth hit her harder than the rope ever had. She remembered the riders. The gunshots. The way the earth shook beneath their hatred. That night, as the fire crackled low, Ethan finally told her his story, of a wife lost to sickness, of a child buried beneath a lone oak tree, of a promise he'd made to himself to never again turn away from suffering just because it was inconvenient. Naya listened in silence, her heart at war with her memories. She had been taught that men like him were monsters. But monsters didn't look at pain with regret in their eyes. As weeks turned into months, the ranch became something she hadn't known existed, a place where she was not hunted, not owned, not broken further. Still, fear clung to her like a shadow, whispering that kindness was just another mask. She didn't know yet that the man she feared would one day stand between her and death, not with violence, but with sacrifice. The night everything changed came without warning, the way storms always do on the plains, rolling in quiet and dark until suddenly the sky split open and reminded the earth who truly ruled it, and Naya woke to the sound of horses screaming, not neighing but screaming in terror, followed by the unmistakable crack of a rifle shot that tore through the darkness like a blade, and in that instant every scar inside her tore open again because she knew that sound, knew what it meant, knew that the past had found her no matter how far she had run, and before she could even sit up. Before fear could fully take shape, the ranch erupted into chaos, lanterns shattering, dogs barking madly, Mary shouting her name from down the hall, and outside, men's voices, hard, laughing, drunk on cruelty, calling out slurs that made Naya's blood turn to ice, because they were the same voices she had heard the day her village burned, the same hatred dressed in different clothes, and instinct screamed at her to run, to hide, to disappear into the night like smoke, but when she stumbled to the window she saw Ethan already moving, already standing between the house and the riders, a shotgun in his hands, his body squared not like a man eager to fight but like one prepared to be broken if that was the cost, and something inside Naya snapped, because no one had ever stood in front of danger for her before, not without demanding something in return, and as the riders closed in, torches flaring, one of them shouted her name, her real name, not the one she had used since hiding among strangers. And that was when she understood the truth Ethan had warned her about months ago, that these men had never stopped hunting her, that the rope, the dragging, the ranch had not been her punishment but her rescue, and before she could stop herself she ran outside, barefoot on cold dirt, shouting for Ethan to get back, but he didn't, he never did, and when the lead rider raised his gun and aimed past Ethan toward her, time seemed to stretch thin, and Ethan moved without thinking, stepping directly into the line of fire as the shot rang out, the impact throwing him backward into the dust, and Naya's scream tore out of her chest like her soul was being ripped free, because the sound of a man falling for her was heavier than any death she had ever witnessed, and the world erupted after that, shots fired, horses rearing, Mary dragging Naya back toward the house as she fought like a wild thing, screaming Ethan's name again and again until her voice broke, but something unexpected happened. Something none of the riders had planned for, because the neighboring ranchers, men who had watched Ethan work himself to exhaustion for years, men whose children he had delivered in storms and whose land he had defended without pay, came riding in from all directions, guns raised, forming a wall of steel and fury, and suddenly the hunters were no longer predators but trapped animals, and they fled into the night, leaving silence and smoke and one broken man behind, and when Naya knelt beside Ethan, pressing her hands against his bleeding chest, begging him to stay, begging the spirits, begging any god that would listen, he looked up at her with the faintest smile and whispered, "Told you, you were safe," and she realized in that moment that safety was not walls or distance or hiding, it was someone choosing you even when it cost them everything. And the days that followed blurred into fear and waiting and prayer as Ethan hovered between life and death, fever burning through him, the doctor shaking his head more than once, and Naya refused to leave his side, feeding him water, wiping his brow, singing the old Apache songs her mother had taught her, the ones meant to call wandering souls back home, and whether it was medicine or stubborn will or those ancient songs, Ethan finally opened his eyes one quiet morning, and when he saw her there he tried to speak but she silenced him with a hand on his chest and tears in her eyes, because words were too small for what he had done, and recovery was slow, painful, humbling, but something else healed alongside his body, because the ranch changed after that night, not just in quiet ways but visible ones, as Naya began to help run it not as a worker but as a partner, teaching Mary her language, planting crops her people had once grown, turning the land into a place where past and present no longer fought each other. And when the authorities finally came, expecting to take her away, expecting resistance, they were met with something stronger than weapons, because Ethan stood before them still weak but unyielding, papers in hand, legal documents proving she was under his protection by choice, not force, backed by half the county willing to swear to his character, and for the first time in her life, Naya watched men with power back down, and seasons passed, scars faded, laughter returned to places that had known only grief. And one evening as the sun bled gold across the plains, Ethan stood beside the oak tree where his child rested and told Naya the truth he had never spoken aloud, that saving her had saved him too, that the emptiness he had lived with had finally loosened its grip, and Naya took his hand not as a captive, not as a survivor, but as a woman who had learned that goodness could wear the face of a stranger, and years later people would tell the story wrong, saying an Apache woman was dragged to a ranch by force. But those who truly knew would say she was dragged out of death and into a life she never believed she deserved, and that one man's quiet courage rewrote two broken destinies. And if this story moved you, if it reminded you that compassion can change the course of lives, that not all heroes arrive gently, then don't let it end here. Subscribe to this channel, because every story you hear might just restore a piece of faith you didn't know you had lost.